Beijing spent 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars building an arms export empire on a single promise: that Chinese weapons had finally matched the West. The HQ-9 air defense network, the precision cruise missiles, the layered electronic warfare suites, all of it marketed as the Great Equalizer, the technology that would end Western military dominance forever. Chinese state television broadcast footage of these systems destroying targets at impossible ranges. Military parades displayed launcher after launcher rolling through Tiananmen Square. The world watched and took note. Then, on the night of October 26, 2024, Israeli F-35I Adir stealth aircraft slipped through every single layer of Iran's Chinese-equipped air defense architecture and destroyed their targets without a single aircraft lost. The weapons Beijing sold as unstoppable were stopped by nothing. What happened in the skies over Tehran did not merely expose Iran's vulnerabilities. It shattered the central promise of China's entire military credibility and sent shockwaves through every defense ministry on Earth currently holding a Chinese contract. The images you are about to see on your screens tell a story that Beijing's propaganda machine cannot erase. What you see is the gap between the weapons China promised and the weapons China actually delivered. Footage from October 2024 documents Israeli aircraft operating freely inside Iranian airspace, while billion-dollar Chinese-derived systems sat blind and silent on the ground below. Satellite imagery confirmed the aftermath: Iranian military installations destroyed, radar sites dark, the promised protection entirely absent. But that is not the most shocking detail. The complete failure of China's crown jewel export system was only the beginning of a crisis now spreading to every corner of Xi Jinping's strategic ambitions. There are two devastating consequences flowing from what happened that night. The first is the collapse of China's arms relationship architecture across 3 continents. The second is the direct implication for Taiwan. We will explain both in the later parts of this video. First, we must examine exactly what broke and why it broke so completely. On October 26, 2024, Israel launched its most ambitious direct strike against Iran, sending waves of F-35I stealth aircraft deep into Iranian territory. The target list included air defense radar sites near Tehran, military installations on Karg Island, and strategic missile production facilities in Isfahan province. Iran had spent years and an estimated $12 billion integrating Chinese defense technology into its air defense network. Components derived from the HQ-9 surface-to-air missile system, long-range early warning radars, and electronic countermeasure suites acquired through intermediary networks designed specifically to circumvent Western sanctions. Iranian state media had declared the airspace impenetrable. The activation of these systems had been broadcast as proof that Beijing's technology had given Tehran the deterrent it needed. The Israeli strike package entered Iranian airspace, completed its mission objectives, and returned to base. Iran's Air Defense Command issued no intercept claims because there were none to make. According to analysis published by the Royal United Services Institute in November 2024, the Israeli mission demonstrated systematic exploitation of known vulnerabilities in the HQ-9's radar architecture that Chinese engineers had never adequately addressed. For Xi Jinping, watching the mission unfold through intelligence feeds, this was not a foreign policy embarrassment. It was a strategic emergency. To understand why China's weapons failed so completely, we need to examine what Iran actually possessed and why those systems proved catastrophically inadequate. The foundation of Iran's Chinese-derived air defense capability rested on the HQ-9 system architecture, which China exports internationally as the FD-2000. Chinese defense marketing claimed engagement ranges of 200 kilometers, altitude ceilings exceeding 30 kilometers, and simultaneous tracking capability against multiple advanced stealth targets. These specifications, accepted at face value by Tehran, turned out to describe a system optimized for test conditions against predictable threats, not combat performance against fifth-generation aircraft with full electronic warfare support. The radar system at the HQ-9's core operates on frequencies that Israel's Sky Shield electronic attack suite, integrated into the F-35I platform, can suppress with documented precision. According to technical assessment from the Center for Strategic and International Studies published in early 2025, The HQ-9's pulse repetition frequencies and waveform patterns had been sufficiently analyzed through years of intelligence collection to enable exact jamming profiles. In direct terms, Israel knew exactly which frequencies to attack, and the HQ-9 had no meaningful countermeasure. Beyond the radar vulnerability, the HQ-9's kill chain, the sequence of detection, tracking, targeting, and launch authorization, carries a critical latency problem. The system requires 8 to 12 seconds from initial radar lock to authorized missile launch. Against a coordinated multi-ship ingress of F-35 is executing supersonic approach vectors with full electronic attack suppression. 8 seconds represents an eternity. The aircraft are gone before authorization arrives. Iranian operators discovered this timing failure in real time, over their own territory, with consequences they could not conceal from satellite imagery the following morning. This is where the strategic implications become truly alarming for Beijing, because the weapon's failure in Iranian airspace did not stay contained to Iran. It immediately triggered a cascading reaction across every nation currently operating Chinese military equipment or actively negotiating procurement. China's arms export program is not simply a revenue source generating approximately $15 billion annually according to SIPRI's 2024 arms transfer database. It is a geopolitical instrument of the first order. Every nation purchasing Chinese weapons becomes strategically dependent on Chinese maintenance contracts, software updates, spare parts supply, and technical support personnel. Every Chinese military system deployed abroad becomes a node of Chinese intelligence access. The systems transmit operational data back to manufacturers under maintenance provisions that purchasing governments routinely fail to scrutinize. The arms relationship creates leverage that Beijing methodically expanded across 3 continents over 2 decades. Pakistan operates J-10CE fighters and JF-17 Thunder aircraft built on Chinese-supplied technology. Saudi Arabia has acquired Chinese ballistic missile systems and wing long drone platforms. Serbia has integrated FK-3 air defense systems, a close technical cousin of the HQ-9, into a military architecture sitting on NATO's eastern periphery. Each of these relationships rests on a single foundational assumption, that Chinese weapons perform as advertised. October 26 challenged that assumption with live-fire evidence that no amount of official silence could suppress. According to reporting from Jane's Defense Weekly in the weeks following the Israeli strikes, multiple Chinese arms customers immediately requested emergency briefings from their own procurement agencies. Algeria reportedly halted payment processing on a pending HQ-22 air defense contract pending technical clarification. Saudi Arabia quietly accelerated parallel procurement discussions with South Korean and European suppliers. Pakistan's Air Force initiated a classified review of J-10CE electronic warfare integration. The architecture Beijing built across 20 years of patient relationship cultivation was beginning to fracture, not gradually, but suddenly. The geopolitical reverberations extend far beyond individual procurement decisions. They reach directly into the strategic narrative that Xi Jinping has used to legitimize his consolidation of power and his promise of national rejuvenation. For 2 decades, China pursued what scholars at Harvard's Belfer Center describe as comprehensive national rejuvenation through strategic patience. Build economic power first, translate it into military capability second, leverage military capability into regional dominance third, and ultimately into global influence that rivals the United States. Arms exports occupied a central role in this architecture, not primarily as revenue, but as relationship builders, leverage creators, and credibility projectors. The weapons failure in Iran has introduced a variable Beijing never fully modeled: the possibility that Chinese military technology, subjected to peer-level testing for the first time, would fail visibly and publicly in ways that systematically unwind the leverage relationships built over 20 years. Consider the Southeast Asian dimension alone. Vietnam, historically balancing Chinese economic relationships against strategic hedging, observed the Iranian demonstration and immediately accelerated procurement discussions with India for BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles. The Philippines, already deepening its alliance with the United States following South China Sea confrontations, used the Iranian engagement to to justify expanded American basing access negotiations. Indonesia opened formal discussions with France regarding Rafale fighter procurement in December 2024. The common thread across these movements is the recognition that October 2024 answered a question that had been theoretically debated for years. Chinese weapons systems fail against modern adversaries employing advanced electronic warfare and stealth technology. This recognition is accelerating a strategic realignment that removes the leverage Beijing accumulated through 20 years of patient arms diplomacy. In the operations centers of the PLA Strategic Support Force, the men and women responsible for analyzing the Iranian engagement data are working through a problem with no comfortable answer. They watched Israeli aircraft operate freely in airspace defended by systems derived from Chinese technology. They watched radar screens that should have tracked incoming threats display nothing until it was too late. And they know, because they have access to the same technical assessments possessed by counterparts in Washington and Tel Aviv, that the vulnerabilities exposed in Iran exist in comparable form in their own domestic systems. The soldier facing this reality is not the confident warrior of state television broadcasts. The expression on his face, as he works through the kill chain analysis again and again, is not triumph, but the recognition of a gap between the capability he believed he possessed and the capability the evidence now confirms he actually holds. Iranian commanders who had briefed their political leadership on the reliability of Chinese-supplied systems found themselves facing questions from those same leaders that carried no satisfactory answers. The human dimension extends to the engineers in Chinese defense firms who designed these systems and who understood, better than any marketing document acknowledged, the gap between specification and performance. A system described as capable of engaging stealth aircraft at 200 kilometers was sold to a customer who organized their entire national air defense architecture around that claim. When the system encountered actual stealth aircraft in actual combat conditions, the specification became irrelevant and the architecture collapsed. Iranian officials speaking anonymously to Financial Times correspondents in November 2024 described genuine shock. Not the managed disappointment of a political setback, but the raw recognition of having been sold protection that did not exist on the night it was needed most. What happens now may determine not only China's arms export future, but the entire trajectory of Xi Jinping's strategic timeline for the coming decade. The short-term response from Beijing has been predictable. Official silence on the Iranian engagement combined with accelerated domestic propaganda about PLA capabilities and emergency technical working groups tasked with developing credible countermeasures. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post in early 2025, China's defense ministry convened these groups specifically to address the stealth electronic warfare combination that dismantled Iran's defenses. They face a fundamental problem that cannot be solved quickly. The radar physics that make stealth aircraft difficult to detect are not a software vulnerability addressable through a patch or firmware update. They require fundamental architectural changes to radar design, changes requiring years to develop, test, and field at operational scale. Meanwhile, the adversaries who exploited these vulnerabilities will continue refining their techniques with the advantage of confirmed success. The medium-term implication leads directly to Taiwan, the horizon that gives everything else its urgency. Xi Jinping has publicly committed to resolving the Taiwan question within a political timeline that creates pressure on PLA operational planning. The military scenario for any action against Taiwan involves precisely the same combination that dismantled Iran's defenses: American F-35s, electronic warfare aircraft, precision munitions, and coordinated multi-axis attacks designed to suppress and destroy air defense networks before any ground or amphibious operations could begin. If the HQ-9 cannot defend Iranian airspace against Israeli F-35s, the question every PLA general must now answer privately is whether any Chinese-manufactured system can defend against American and allied F-35s operating with the full weight of United States electronic warfare capability behind them. The answer, according to analysts at the RAND Corporation who published a preliminary assessment in February 2025, is deeply uncomfortable. This could push Xi toward accepting an indefinite delay in the Taiwan timeline, which creates domestic political pressure he has spent years eliminating, or toward accepting elevated operational risk by moving before the limitations become more widely understood and defended against. Only time will tell which calculation prevails behind the walls of Zhongnanhai. But we are watching a moment where the gap between China's projected military power and its demonstrated military capability has been exposed with a clarity that cannot be wished away and cannot be papered over with parade footage and state media broadcasts. The airspace Beijing called impenetrable proved anything but. The weapons China sold as unstoppable sat silent, while an adversary's aircraft completed their mission and returned home. And Xi Jinping, who built his legacy on the promise that China's military rise was real and irreversible, now faces the uncomfortable reality that the world has seen the gap between the promise and the performance and is acting accordingly. Don't forget to share your thoughts on this topic in the comments below. Do you think China can recover its military credibility before the Taiwan question forces a decision? Or has the Iranian demonstration permanently altered the strategic calculus? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Presented by TGN. Thank you for choosing us.